These are some of my observations. I'm just going to talk off the top of my head. Some of the things I'm observing. One of the things that I'm seeing by both sides of the political spectrum is almost a form of political ideology, political myopathy that is more akin to the Roman worship of political leaders. And I say this in that I see it on both sides. So when we're talking about dealing with the contextual framework of our times, what we have to understand is that we are dealing with a time period where the divisions have balkanized the nation. Now, it's not balanced. If I have to make a determination, I would say that although both sides have their confusion and their perplexity, I'd also have to say that the radical nature of the left leadership within the federal government and states and in some local jurisdictions have gone draconian. And they've gone draconian even as they're projecting onto others, and have for the last 4 years. And when I see that, that shows me, one, the probability that they do not understand or are cogent of what they do themselves, meaning they're in darkness. Two, it's much more insidious. They don't care. When I see people projecting what they've done, what they are doing, and what they plan to do on others, that to me is a large warning flag that reveals evil. Now, that said, both sides of the equation have made political idols out of their leadership, particularly that of the presidency. And that is a very troubling, if not utterly frustrating, reality that we are in. And, I often see things that I do and say attributed to other people. Now it's gone past what I write, what I produce as work. And this has been the case for a while. But it's attributed to somebody else who's a leader. And I'm not going to go into the specifics of it, but I've documented this over the course of many years. This isn't the first time I've seen this. This has been an ongoing problem. That is a particular problem on the right. There's a different version of it on the left. On the left, they take things out of context and misappropriate it, right? Misapply it, misuse it to mislead others. Both sides are doing similar things in different ways. Now, when it comes to that in the terms of where we're at, when you're doing that on either side of the spectrum or both, and things continue to worsen, right? That should tell you something, both sides, that you're both in the wrong. That you both, right, are misappropriating, misapplying, misusing information, right? Other people's work, right? Even their own identities. And in doing so, you're actually creating a bigger problem for both. Now, there's varying degrees of this. There's a gradient, right? A spectrum. But I'm not telling you these things because I'm trying to be rude. I'm telling you these things because you need to know what it is that you're doing and what the consequences are of doing it. Now, if I'm wrong, I would appreciate it if you would actually let me know, explain it to me. I will hear you out. I will do what I don't get generally from either side the farther out you go on the extreme, to the extremes. I'll hear you out. I will do for you, right? I will listen to you, even though you don't do that with me. Now, if you don't take me up on it and you think I'm wrong or you want to cast this out, well, you know what? All that does is that shows me exactly what your intents are and why you're doing it. You're just going to expose yourself. And the more that you misappropriate, misapply, misuse, right? The knowledge, the understanding, even people's identities, my own in this case as well. Well, you're just increasing the severity of your problem, the complexity of it, and ultimately, right, the consequences that will have to be rendered because of it. Now, there's a point at which leadership transcends position. There's a point at which you have to understand leadership transcends all of your titles, right? Your acronyms, all the things that everybody loves to put on resumes and tout when they go to networking events. That's part of your problem, both sides. It's actually a form of vanity after a certain point. But I can tell you this. It's not about your worldly credentials. It's about the orientation of your heart, your mind, and the actions and words thereof, and the impacts they have. So one of the other things I've really questioned, and I want to focus on the center right to right extreme, is I hear a lot of people talk about the Lord. What I don't hear often is, well, let me just start with what I do hear. I hear what God's given you, right? What He's done with you, and what you want. What I don't hear is a lot of gratitude. What I don't hear is level of humility, right? Now, I'm not saying there isn't any there. I'm just saying I don't hear it. I hear it from some. I'm not speaking in absolutes here. There's always a spectrum, right? But I also think that some of you don't realize that you are quick to quench things spiritually in ways that actually may harm the movement of the Spirit of truth. And actually, in fact, hurt the entire body. Of course, that's not everyone. And of course, there's limited time, right? Here, there's limited time. But I think sometimes, right, there's a tendency to be quick to shut down what you don't yet understand, right? Or maybe downplay it and push it back, when the depth of those things may be exactly what you need at this time, in the middle of the crisis that you are in and entering into. I think that's particularly difficult for type A personalities, right? I know I'm a type A personality, I understand that. But I think it's very difficult, not only for just type A personalities, but for leaders, especially in the church in America, and particularly in the charismatic side of the church, as well as the other various versions and shades on the spectrum of, the parts of the body here. Now, of course, I'm not speaking to everyone. I don't think some of you understand the resolution at which I see things. And I don't blame you for that. I'm not condemning you for that. You haven't spent enough time with me to understand, what my own giftings are and how they play out. But I also can tell you that you haven't spent enough time in the Word, in many things, and have made assumptions as to what they mean that are patently wrong. And if you're not willing to hear that, then you don't have the authority to actually call out anybody else on anything until you're willing to deal with that. I'm not talking about being perfect. What I'm talking about is realizing that you are imperfect and fallible, and that everything may not be exactly as you think it is. That particularly is the case when it comes to eschatological views. That's particularly the case in this country in particular, when it comes to understanding how we got here and why and what it's going to take for us to deal with these issues in our country, right, and in the church here, not just in the government. And that is going to take for some of you a great deal of humbling to be able to have that conversation. Some of you are not going to be able to. But by not having it, you're actually hurting all of us, including me. Now, I want to tell you a couple of things. Let me tell you a pattern I've noticed in my life and why it is I operated pretty much solo for most of my life. It was the lack of people willing to actually have conversations, build deep relationships, that allow for trust, right? And also to be able to, iron sharpening iron. We all need that, right? So one day, I'll give you a perfect example. This is an example from a number of years ago, right? Many years ago. I was sitting in a coffee shop, and a gentleman I knew who was a brother in Christ came up and told me all the things I was doing wrong. He thought I believed wrong, or was making a list of stuff, right? Kind of like Job's friends, but not even as cogent. And he said, "You need to really be discipled." And I'm like, "Okay, when do you want to start?" And then he proceeded to give me a long list of reasons why he didn't have time to do it. He never once explained anything to me, right? That he said I was wrong about. He would not take the time to even do it. So I told him to go to hell. Figuratively, of course. And told him he doesn't have the authority to come to me with anything and tell me I'm doing something A, B, or C wrong if he can't explain it to me. And he can't, tell me. He doesn't have the authority to tell me I need to be discipled when he's not willing to do it himself. He's a hypocrite. He's duplicitous. And that's actually an evil thing to do. Now, I forgave him, right? But I could give you countless examples across the body, the part of the body that is in America, right? Across denominations, across communities, from house churches to Bible studies, to more organized structures, structural churches. Do you think that God's going to give me a rock and a snake when I'm asking for food and water? I'm asking to understand? No. So if you want to know how it is I know what I know, it's because none of you would do it. So I ask him to do it. And that is who has discipled me and who's taught me. And that is precisely why it is I asked him to do the same thing with all those that are like me and with me. For a number of reasons. One, right? It has less yeast, less leaven. We've got enough confusion in this world and enough confusion in the church. Right? And doctrines and everything else. Is it any wonder that people are perplexed? First off, I have to ask, all right, is God the author of confusion? No. Is he the author of fear? No. If you were not given a spirit of fear nor confusion, why is there so much of it everywhere I look in the church here? Including within the leadership at the top. Doesn't matter the denomination. Doesn't even matter the groups. Why do I see so much of that? And I'm talking about spiritually see it. Why is it that I'm constantly hearing yeast? You've got almost more yeast than you have dough here. Is it any wonder everybody is utterly confused? There's a scripture that has been coming up on a regular basis for a long time. And it's basically a rebuke. And it's the Lord saying, "You have worn out my words. You've muddied the waters." Right? And you have. You need to repent of that as a church. Individually and collectively. You see, God doesn't need you, right? The Lord does not need you to perform what needs to be performed and done what needs to be done here. It's your privilege, it's your honor. He wants that for you. It's part of your inheritance. But he doesn't need you to do it. He's not dependent upon you for his plan. to actually succeed. The success of his plan, his will, right, is not dependent upon you. Right? If you think that, you've got it backwards. You are dependent upon him. You need him. Right? In him, all things are possible. It is not if you're not in his will. Now I tell you that not because I'm trying to be, obtuse, right? But I have to tell you, I am sick and tired of having to daily, right, remove the excess yeast, leaven from the dough here. And it's nearly constant. It's getting to the point where, at least here in the West, that people aren't even willing to test anything. It's only what they already know or fits into their preconceived, predilections. You have to understand, the church wouldn't be in the shape that it is here in the West, and particularly here in America. And the government and the country wouldn't be in the shape that it was in if you were as accurate, right? If you were where you need to be and trusting him, testing things and seeking the truth above all things, including doctrines. Right? You're in a relationship. If you're not in a relationship with him, you don't know who you are, and you don't know who he is. And you sure as heck don't know who the rest of us are. The other thing I see is a great deal of, best way I can put it is, slumber. There's a lot of people asleep here. And they're not just asleep, right? They're in the way and asleep. They're actually preventing things from occurring because they're not awake, spiritually speaking. Now, some may have a problem with saying that too. That's okay. I've grown up in your crucible, secular and religious-wise, my entire life. So this is nothing new to me. That's why I'm telling you some of these things. I've had to learn in ways that are quite different than 99% of you. That doesn't mean I'm infallible. Every single thing that I tell you, I put out, I ask you to test. Most of the time, people won't even listen or read it, much less test it. But let me just throw something out to you. If what I'm saying is true to you, or has the possibility of being true, and it's vital for the church and for this country and for you maybe specifically, and you don't read it, right? You don't listen, and you don't test it, do you know that you're still responsible for it? Do you not understand that? Especially if you're in leadership. Another thing I'd like to talk about is how people judge things in terms of, we talk about the fruit of the Spirit. Okay? That's how you judge a tree by the fruit it bears, right? How do you judge the fruit? Just by appearances? I mean, how many times have you gone to a grocery store and gotten a perfectly good, look great, look perfect, perfectly good apple or orange or whatever, and you got it home and it was actually rotten on the inside, something was wrong? You see, if you don't exercise discernment, spiritual discernment, right, which is a whole lot different than knowing Bible verses, right, and being able to recite them and to judge things by outer appearances. If you don't understand that you have to exercise spiritual discernment, that's actually a gifting, right? And how do you know when you're doing Q&A or doing QA, quality assurance, right, on the people around you, that you're in the right? See, none of this is new to me. I've heard this crap my entire life. That's why I ask people to explain stuff to me. That's how I learn. And when they refuse to do that, that's when I ignore them on everything else. I still learn from them, but they can't speak into my life. They don't have the authority to do that. And they sure as heck don't have the authority to judge me in any manner whatsoever. Do you know who's judged me the most here in America? My own people. The church here. Most of my life. I forgive them. But it's not exclusively that. This is the most judgmental, blind, arrogant, and immature place I've ever seen in my life. And I mean that secular and spiritually. Doesn't mean they're not incredibly mature, wise, kind, loving, knowledgeable people in this country. There's a lot of those as well. But overall, you can purport to be one thing as a nation, but the reality is, if I were to tell you how I see it and how I was shown it, you might find that how God views it as well is probably a lot different than you do. And if anybody here has the authority to actually call it out, it's probably me. Because I've lived the things that I talk about. It isn't just, having, lived in as a bubble boy. I can back up what I tell you. And that goes for theologically, spiritually, and otherwise. You see, you don't know that if you don't take time with me. And let me tell you what the Lord showed me a couple of days ago about that. When I was telling him how that I was frustrated about it, I didn't know what to do, and I was just trying to give it to him, right? He's like, son, I allow that to happen so you understand how I feel, because they won't come to me either. But think about what I just said. I was praying, spending time in prayer and meditation, telling the Lord how frustrated I am that everybody's so busy, right? That they can't take time to even test things that I write or he gives me to give to people, right? Or listen to it, right? Or even take time to get to know me. And his response was, son, that's okay. Now I've allowed that to happen so that you understand how it is they are with me, because they won't do that with me either. Now think about what I just told you. That's the church of Laodicea. They've locked the door on the inside. They have wealth, right? Their position, power, influence, right? What they don't have is time. Because all of their time is spent on worldly things according to the worldly clock. And they have an appearance of things. But beyond the appearance, they've locked the door. They've locked him out. They don't take time with him either. That blew my mind. It's not the first time he's shown me that. He's done it in other ways. And he does it wherever I go. He shows me what's going on. He teaches me. I learn from everything. I learn from everybody. The sad fact is very few people are humble enough to actually learn anything from me or him. And they assume that what they know is complete and accurate. And in most cases, it's not. That is why you live in a land of confusion. And that's why fear and confusion, right, comes bundled with it lawlessness, depravity, desolation. Now, I am blessed to be around some men and women that I have a great deal of respect for, and I'm growing in relationship, getting to know. And I learn from. The Spirit moves. But even with us, there are things I don't say that I perceive because I still feel controlled. And you know what he showed me about that? That's exactly how he feels. That people and places and things here in this world, even in the church, are trying to do to him. And as C.S. Lewis wrote about Aslan, right? He's not safe, but he is good. But everything here, everybody wants safe. And I see it all the time. It's why I walked out of your four walls long time ago. It is. And you know who led me there? The Lord. He led me away from your four walls, your churches, your organizations, to actually teach me and prepare me. And he did that with a lot of us in different ways. Mostly because a lot of your communities, right, didn't know what to do with people or treated them wrongly. You see, if you're going to point out a speck in your brother or sister's eye, you need to first go and remove the log or logs, plural, from your own. I rarely meet people that are Christians, right, that know really what it means when I say, who are you? What is your identity truly in? What are you living out? You know what the Lord shows me about that? In those days, son, these days, that's what he says, right? In these days, just as I said, people will practice an outward form of religion, but deny the power of the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit, being the Spirit of truth, is what sets you free. So they remained in bondage and fear and confusion, lacking discernment, lacking a proper understanding of His wisdom and His knowledge, which is saving knowledge, and do not see what they do to their own people, their own brothers and sisters. And in many cases, they aren't brothers and sisters anymore, or never were, because they don't have a love for the truth. And if they don't have a love for the truth, they don't have a love for the Spirit of truth. And if they don't have a love for the Spirit of truth, they don't love Him, and they don't worship Him properly, because you can only worship God in truth and in spirit, in a legitimate manner. All else is worthless. It's whitewash. It's dead. Same thing that I see in religion is the same thing I see in secular government. I see pretenders. I see people that hide behind their positions, right? Their worldly credentials, where they went to school, their name, whatever it is. That is irrelevant in the scheme of things. That's not government, right? What that is playpen time. And when crisis hits and things fall apart,
my name is Gladiator.
Well, first off, when crisis comes, you're being tested.
How dare you show your back to me? Slave!
You're being exposed.
You will remove your helmet and
Everything is being exposed in a crisis. Why do you think what, Christians call the Great Tribulation and the Native Americans call the Great Purification, and it's both, right?
Commander of the armies of the North, General of the Felix Legions.
Mean by that?
Loyal servant to the true Emperor.
Why do you think you were warned there would be trials and tribulations? Same reason why you were warned few of you should consider yourselves worthy of being in leadership. You'll be judged to a higher standard.
I will have my vengeance in this life or the next.
Leaders, above all things, should be humble enough to understand their own fallibility, their own insufficiencies. And leaders should also understand how important it is to understand and seek the truth in love, that they may be able to be ministers, right, of justice and mercy, and wield the sword of civil government properly from a position of humility and contriteness of heart. If they are unwilling to do that, they're unfit to be in leadership, because leadership is servanthood. Okay? That's why I always speak about servant leadership. I don't seek people around me that are yes men. I seek people around me that are going to challenge me, that are going to help me grow, that are going to help me understand things. Right? If I'm wrong on something, they're going to help me see that. Right? I expect that of all leaders. When I have encountered leaders that are unwilling to be corrected or teachable, be it in the secular side or the spiritual side of things, right? To me, it's all unified, right? So the secular world or the, religious side of things, that's how people have created the paradigm down here, right? If they're unwilling to teach and instruct, if they're unwilling to be instructed and learn, they're unfit to be leaders. If they're not willing to test the information they receive and also take responsibility for it, and take responsibility for their own choices, their own actions, their own decisions, and admit that they may or may not be right. They may be wrong. Be willing to actually investigate it, do the due diligence. Then they're unfit to be in leadership. I don't care who they are. I don't care how they got there. I don't care if they were appointed, if they went up the ranks, if they were elected or if they're a bureaucrat. I don't care if they were hired as a CEO or anything else. That's all irrelevant. What's relevant is how you do your job, what you're called to do. And you're called to be a servant leader, and a servant leader leads by example. And the reason why they're held to a higher standard is because they have more power and influence over others. Therefore, their decisions have greater impacts on more people, faster. And those ripple effects spread out exponentially fast and affect more and more people. That is how you will be judged. It is how you're being tested right now in the public and private sector, in secular and spiritual or religious circles. Do you not understand what time it is? I don't tell you these things to be, beating you over the head with them. But it is quite amazing. We live in a time that refuses to listen to wisdom. It refuses to exercise much wisdom. And everybody's pointing at everybody for the very things that they themselves are either responsible for having done, are doing, or plan to do. Regardless of which side of the spectrum and whatever part of the seven spheres they're operating in. You're not going to like this. Your country is the way it is because you have refused to listen to truth. You've refused to listen to warnings. And in many cases, you're still refusing to do so. That's rebellion. That's pride. And pride comes before the fall. And you have to understand, right? There's not a single nation on earth that's righteous, any more than there's a single individual here that's righteous in their own wisdom and works. No, I've lived my life under the microscope being judged by everybody for almost nearly everything in my life, both inside and outside your institutions of religion and government and everything else. You did me a favor, just like the gentleman that refused to disciple me, right? Did me a favor. I'm grateful. Because it forced me to actually have to go to God Almighty before the throne and ask Him to raise me and teach me. Therefore, I know what I know, and what I don't know, I can go and ask. I'm not dependent upon your institutions, what you think, what you do, or what you refuse to do, or don't have time to do. That doesn't mean that I'm still not part of, I'm part of a community. I need that community. But you have to understand, I learned to live without it, out of necessity, not by choice. And God never abandoned me there. That's why when it comes down to it, when I use war language, whether I'm dealing with government-related stuff, or whether I'm dealing with spiritual-related stuff, or speaking on them, or whether I'm dealing with both, which is most of the time, because I don't see a difference. That's how I was made. No one's been able to explain that either for 50-something years. But I will tell you this, is that I've never been without a connection to my brothers and sisters that have gone on before me, and my Heavenly Father, who teaches me. Now, the one side of the equation thinks that's crazy. The other side, right, say, "Oh, well, that's cool, right? That's what we believe." Well, if you believe it, then why don't you actually live it? Why don't you exercise it? It's the same thing with authority. If you believe you have authority, right, and you truly have been given authority, spiritual authority over things here, why do you not exercise it? You know, there's a reason why Jesus said, "My people perish because of lack of knowledge." He wasn't talking about building the internet so everybody could have access to knowledge, although that's just a tool. It can be used. God uses all things, right? He works it all together for the good of those who love Him and are called for His purposes by His name. But saving knowledge is knowledge that comes under the governance of godly wisdom, His wisdom. Right? That wisdom governs the knowledge that you have and the knowledge that He gives you to complete it and puts it into its correct context that then leads you to use it appropriately according to His will and plan and timing. It's not called the divine logos for nothing. That's what the word logic comes from. The divine logic is a higher order logic of anything that I see here. It is who I am and who we are called to be. We are made in His image after all. However imperfect, we are living in these temporal tents of skin. Now, if you notice, I focused more on religious and spiritual matters, right? In terms of language set. But just because I focused it on that does not mean it's not applicable across the board to every sphere, all the 7 spheres, right, of society, especially government. Being in government is not about you. It's a sacred duty. It's a responsibility. It comes with consequences bundled with it when you do not do rightly by it, when you operate in pride and arrogance, when you do things your way according to your wisdom and your works. And what do you get for that? Well, He gives you your way. And what your way is, in that case, following that path, is the way to your destruction. You cannot govern properly. You cannot lead properly unless you understand this from your heart to your head to your mouth to your actions. The truth and love brings about justice and mercy from a humble and contrite heart. If you are not positionally there internally from the inside out, you're probably positionally in the wrong place if you're in leadership. Regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, secular, religious, or around the 7 spheres. And I can tell you, you can't hide it anymore. It is plainly seen here how far that rod goes. Now back to my brothers and sisters in Christendom. You cannot have the kingdom without the king. No flesh inherits the kingdom. And God never ever cedes to an electorate his choice of who his king is, that he chooses. So when you become kingmakers, you need to check yourselves and make sure that you're electing, or choosing or following something that is from your own psyche, your own flesh, your own wants and needs,
Protector of Rome after
as you see it, or it is actually what you're called to do.
to give power back
Because
to the people of Rome
there's a lot of things being done
that has crippled.
and being assigned to things and people and places that are not only not accurate, right, but it's idolatrous.
With all my heart, no.
And he is a jealous God.
Maximus. That is why it must be you.
Just telling you. The spiritual kingdom comes first. That already has a king. What flows out of that when the government is established beyond that, once and for all, is not a choice made by you, it's a choice made by him. He is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords after all. And until you can understand what that means,
Oh, you should see the Colosseum, Spanish.
until you can you spent some time and really understand, or at least seeking to understand,
Of your sword.
what it means that he's the King of Kings, plural, and the Lord of Lords, plural,
The noise afterwards. Right.
you might have some gaps in how you view things spiritually and in your eschatological views and in your overall worldview.
Gladiator. Yes, it was. You won your freedom.
Some of which can actually become great stumbling blocks to you
Presented me with Herodias. It's
and to others. That's why it is important for us all to remain humble and test all things.
he touched me on the shoulder.
I don't subscribe to systems of eschatological thought.
Marcus Aurelius.
I did not say I knew him. I said he touched
I don't throw things out either.
You asked me what I want.
I seek the truth,
I do want to stand in front of
and I study, and I look, and I test,
you. Learn from me.
and I ask God to show me. Because guess what? I don't want to add any more to the confusion and noise,
I was the best.
right, and fear from it. Fear, in this case, being false evidence appearing real, which is everywhere here. I don't want to add to the confusion here. That's my daily prayer. I ask that. I want to be somebody who brings more clarity to things. After all, we're not given a spirit of fear nor of confusion, but a peace, of love, a power, which is authority, and a sound mind. A sound mind may be buffeted by fear and confusion. It is not ruled by it. There's a reason why it is Jesus told you, right, to test these things, right? Beware of the yeast of the teachers. That's why he wants you to test things. He wants you to take it to him. There's a checks and balance system in the kingdom, in the Spirit. That's why the Holy Spirit is the Spirit of truth. And the Spirit of truth will lead you into all truth. All. Not bits and pieces, not parts, all. Not someone's interpretation of it, but the truth, all truth, in its proper context, right? Which is saving knowledge, because it sets you free from the bondage of fear and confusion and mixture, right? And that is all governed by the wisdom of God. And there's where the proper fear is. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's the fear of separation, not pleasing him, right? It's a totally different thing. It's not fear of being abused, beaten, or accused by him. He loves you. The greatest fear in the world, that's a legitimate fear, right, is being separated from him. If you don't believe that, think about what Jesus said on the cross when he tasted that for all of us. Father, why have you forsaken me? The other thing I've said this before, Psalm 2 is my life psalm for a lot of reasons, some of which I've gotten into talks, and some of which I'll unpack at another time, which is more appropriate. But the reason why I bring that up is that is what you're seeing playing out before your very eyes in this world right now, in this country, at every level. Why the people's in a tumult and the nations, right, in an uproar? Why do the leaders, right, the rulers, imagine a vain thing? Why do they conspire together, right? I can tell you why. Pride, greed, avarice, hubris, fear, confusion, lies. They're in a lie. They're in rebellion. They love their darkness more than they love the light of the truth. They love false light more than they love the light. Nothing is hidden. It's all exposed and being exposed. It's being exposed on earth as it already is in heaven. You see, that's a great example of the leaders creating the conditions for their own downfall, and the people creating the conditions for their own downfall and destruction with them. Now, what comes in those conditions is exactly what I said. Fear, confusion, right? Pride, right? Lies. And what preps the ground? Well, some of you should do a little research and look at the three nets of Belial or Belial, right? Depends on how you want to say it. Pollution of the temple by pharmakia. What is pharmakia? Right? It's often rendered sorcery or magic, right? It's a terrible rendering. It means to drug or poison. Is this not operative in our day? What do you think COVID, manufactured illness is? What do you think fentanyl, carfentanil, meth, coke, What do you think all that is? What do you think it is when both those things have in common one industry? Big Pharma. They also have China connected to it. So there, I will say, I'll take you back to the beginning. And the serpent, the Nakash, was the most crafty, cunning, deceptive of all the beasts of the field. Nakash means shining or glistening one. Are you not told that Satan appears like an angel of light? Like an angel of light, right, is different from actually appearing as an angel of light. One reflects light, one is light. Just like the sun is light and the moon reflects light. It has no light of its own. It's a dead rock. It's amazing how the nations are wanting to fight over that now. Can you not discern the signs and the seasons, in the heavens above, in the sun, the moon, the stars, and in creation below? Do you not understand these things? Or are you too busy to look? Or do you just not care? Or are you overwhelmed? Which most people are. It's okay. Right? But it's becoming obvious. Right? There is a convergence of things occurring right now that's unique in history. All of those things happening at the same time, and the amplitude that they're happening, the scale at which they're happening on Earth and in the heavens. Just look at the solar system alone. You see, if you don't see the signs, you don't discern the signs and the times, and you're in leadership, you have a big problem. Because that's part of your role. It determines some of your decision making. And of course, being in leadership, your decision making affects more than just you. Nothing happens in a vacuum here. And if you're operating positionally from a place of fear, right? Confusion, pride, which is yeast, leaven, you leaven the entire thing. That has a ripple effect throughout everybody and everything around you. There's a reason why I say, as it is for people, so too it is for nations. Nations are made of people. Leaders are people. And then there's the powers and principalities, the spiritual reality that governs all these things that is beyond this. If you're positionally blind and you're in leadership and you don't understand the metasphere, the spiritual reality in which you're operating, well, I pity you. Because you're a slave, you're a proxy to a lie and you don't even know it. But it is all too apparent in the fruit on your tree from the decisions, right, and the actions taken and the outcomes thereof. You don't judge a harvest on the day that you plant the field. You judge a harvest at harvest time. when the fruit is mature. It's harvest time. Now, what am I telling you that for? What am I signaling to you? If you don't test what I'm telling you, how do you know it's true? If you don't test it and it is true, think about the predicament you're in if you are in a position of leadership. And even if you're not. You can deny things all day long and to the point where your denial runs out of fuel when the consequences are too great to stick your head in the sand and ignore them. Usually, at that point, the pain and suffering that is required because of denial through all the warnings is so great that most people are destroyed by it. One of the things that I say in these times all the time is that all will be humbled and raised up, or humiliated and torn down to the dust of the ground. And what is on the dust of the ground? Isn't that where the serpent was cursed? To be in the dust of the dust, crawl in the dust of the earth, right? What else is on the dust in the dust? Your shadow. A light source always casts the shadow away from it. Now think about that. Think about what I'm telling you. All that's done in the darkness is revealed in the light. You see, what the lie does is it leaves you holding the bag for what it has done. It's still going to pay the consequences, but you see, so are you, in a different way. That's what it counts on. That is the lie. That's the trap. That's what temptation does, right? It lures you into a trap. The shadow needs you. That's the lie, right? It lies to you. The shadow needs you, not the other way around. The shadow is the lie. If the shadow is in your head because you have been darkened, right? The spirit of the age has darkened your mind. Do you understand what the consequences of that is? The more wealth, power, control, and influence that you have, the more that you have leadership over people, places, and things. Worse yet, if you know these things and you're in the light, but you've become carnal, you've walked away, and you're doing things your way for whatever reason, right? You're at risk at trading the truth for a lie. See, when you do that, you're still going to actually pay the consequences. God is just. It's all dealt with. He disciplines those he loves, and to those that don't love him, it's punishment. Somebody asked me, how can a loving God judge people? How can a loving God not judge things rightly? After all, you can't have justice and mercy without truth and love. Is it loving to be complicit with a lie? Complicit with the things or turn the other way when you know that there are powers, principalities, there are things at work trying to destroy people and use people as proxies to do its bidding, unbeknownst to them in many cases, but in most cases they do know. In their heart, everybody knows. What should we turn The vulnerable, the weak, right? The elderly, the sick, the orphaned, right? Should we turn them over to lawlessness because we're loving our enemy? If you think that is the way it works, then you are not in a position to actually be in any kind of leadership role. You don't understand your role. You can't look out for those people. You don't understand truth and love, nor justice or mercy, which means, most likely, more often than not, you're an arrogant fool. You don't understand humility, right? Or contriteness of heart. Far too often we oversimplify everything here in the West. Far too often we speak to the lowest common denominator as if people don't have the possible, capabilities of thinking for themselves. That's not love, that's codependency. It's actually a form of pride and addiction. It's still a lie. It's a form of lawlessness. You can throw political correctness under there. That would fit underneath that as well. Do you not understand everything that you are doing here in this country has been seen? It's about to be fully judged. Do you not understand that? That's why I call this nation out on stuff. I've had people go off on me on both sides of the spectrum, the secular and the religious. Say, well, if you don't like this country, you should get out. If I didn't like this country, I wouldn't call it out. If I didn't love the people here, I wouldn't call it out. Likewise, I'm a hypocrite if I don't call out the things in my own house and be willing to deal with them while I'm having to deal with those in other houses and other nations. Justice is justice. That's not limited by borders. Truth in love, justice in mercy, humility and contriteness of heart is not an American invention. I don't like having to deliver tough messages to people, but there's a time for tough love. But it would seem that very few people in this country, regardless of what they say they believe, right? Whether they're secular or whether they're religious, political or apolitical, whatever. No one likes tough love. But everybody loves to use the word love. You've almost worn that out completely too. How about this word for you? Holy. God is holy. There is no darkness in him. He's an all-consuming fire. Yes, God is love, but God's love is not divorced, not separate. In fact, it is perfectly unified with truth and justice and mercy and humility. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. So I tell you these things that you understand them and you will go and test them. That's why I tell you. If I tell you these things and you find that I'm off on something, then have a conversation with me. Don't stand in the shadows and fire arrows at me or fiery darts. You're going to lose that war. No weapon fashioned against me will prosper. In fact, it's worse than just that. He will strip you of the weapons and then turn them around, hand them to me, and I'll use them properly against you. Doesn't mean I hate you. It does mean that I am just. I still forgive you. I forgive you for what you do to me. But you're still going to pay the consequences for what you do before Him. What those consequences are boils down to you, not me. So I tell you these things to consider them, and I hope that you do. I really, truly hope you take the time to do it. You know, some people can, you know, I've even had some people, I hear you over there, Blackbird. It reminds me of Elijah, right? Elijah was fed by blackbirds under the juniper, right? Pretty amazing. Great symbolism. They're protectors, you know. And they're also a symbol for death, right? I think there's some folks that would understand that, right? The old crows. Anyway, what I was saying is that, you know, you I lost my train of thought, but that's okay. I've had people tell me that there are a lot of people that work for the, you know, Kingdom Fruit Company that love to go around, you know, judging all the fruit, right? Of course, most of the time they do it wrongly because they don't want to actually look at their own from the inside out. But there are people that actually will test stuff and do it rightly. But what I'm telling you is this, is that they would come to me and say, because of the tone of my voice, right? I have a very deep voice. My voice is like a line. Kind of goes with my name, right? My first name, Uthiel, right? Means line of God. It is the Hebrew name, right? It's the Hebrew version of Otis, which is the Latin, right? Which means he who hears God is wealthy, right? So people used to go off on me and say that I was angry or I came across the wrong way and I'm not showing the love of Christ or whatever. I've heard it all. I've heard it all from the religious folks and from the secular folks. So if you're going to come to me with stuff, I hope you do. If I am off on something and I need to be corrected, I would hope that you would do that. But I also hope that you would take the time to remove any speck that may be in your eye or logs before you do it. And come to me with stuff that is profitable for both of us. Because if I am in a positional fallacy with something, I need to know. Because I care about what's true. My whole life has been driven by it. It's like a fire that burns inside me, right? So I surely don't want to be a part of adding to more confusion here. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that my flesh is any better than yours or anybody else's. It's not. Thank goodness. Praise God that my identity is not based in the old man, the flesh. But if it were, you'd be surprised what my heritage is in the flesh. If anybody could boast, especially in terms of government, it'd be me. And that includes the military. What's important is not the old thing, which is my flesh. What is important is who I am in the new man, the spirit man. For the old thing passes away, the new thing lasts eternally. But as long as I have a tint of mortal flesh, right, I make mistakes. I'm willing to learn from my mistakes. What I'm not willing to do is to accept accusations, right, from others, right, that are unfounded. And I'm not willing to accept correction from others that don't build a relationship with me and teach me, show me where I've gone wrong. Okay? You actually have to build a relationship, right? After all, our relationship with the Lord is a real relationship if you're a real person of faith. Is it not true? See, for me, I don't even like the word religion. I'm not a religious person. Most religious people can't stand me. And moderately religious people don't know what to do with me. Same thing on the other side of the spectrum with secularists. They don't know how to deal with me either. I don't fit neatly into people's boxes. Well, guess what? God uses the foolish things of this world to confound those that are wise in their own eyes, and relying upon their own flesh, their own wisdom, and their own works, apart from Him. Who do you think taught me to talk like this? Who do you think taught me these concepts? I didn't learn this from you. I learned a lot of things from a lot of you, and always do, and always will. You should test that too. Ask him. Ask him who's taught me. Don't take my word for it. But don't assume, right, things that you ought not to assume before doing your due diligence. When I speak on something, I do my due diligence. It may not come off the way that you might like, in the format or whatever external way that you would prefer. But I do try. A myriad of ways. I can switch between the common vernacular, theological language, scientific language, you name it, all day long. That's why I use different means of communication. There's a method to the madness, and people actually will sit down and talk. I'll explain it. I don't consider myself better than anybody here. But I just wonder why it is that so many, right, I can learn from, but so few are willing to learn from me. Why it is I'm quick to build others up and to offer solutions, and people are quick to take them, take credit for them, monetize it, right? Or use it to bolster their own reputations, or completely give it to somebody else to build a false reality. Why is that? Why is it that you demand grace of me when I already give grace, and you demand tolerance of me when both sides, one side's intolerant while demanding tolerance, and one side's demanding grace while refusing to give me any? Why do you think that is? Do you think that you have the authority to do that to me? Do you think that is gone unseen. I forgive you. But you're going to take responsibility for your own choices and your own actions. Love covers a multitude of sins. I love you. I ask God to forgive you if you do things to me. And I ask you to forgive me if there are things I've done legitimately wrong, right? That has caused you harm, hurt, confusion, fear, whatever. And when I mean fear, I mean false evidence appearing real. There's a healthy kind of fear too. That's not what I'm talking about. But I do ask you to consider why it is I know what I know and how I know it. Test it. See if I'm accurate. When I tell you something is coming down the pipeline, something is going to happen, there's a reason why I'm telling you that. Test it. Am I accurate? If you want to know why I'm saying it, and I haven't put it out, usually I explain it right out of the chute. But what I'm finding is people are either overloaded because of information, overload, right? A flood of information, right? They're worn out, they're tired, right? Their stress levels are high and their tolerance to stress is low, right? So they're not able to do, they just can't handle it anymore. I get it. Believe me. I don't condemn you for that. I understand that. I'm no different than you in that. I just approach it differently than some of you. You know? And in some ways I don't. Some days I just blow it. It's okay. I'm still going to learn. God's still going to give me the victory. Right? And His grace is sufficient for me. But is His grace sufficient for you? Who are you? Do you know who you are in Him? Do you know what you're capable of? With Him and without Him. Because the two come bundled together. Because to understand what you're truly capable of, you have to be shown what it is He had to free you from at the cross. And that is not pleasant. But it is part of the process. And His yoke is a heck of a lot easier. His burden is a lot easier than trying to shoulder your own pride, your own greed, your own avarice, your own hubris, right? And living chained in the darkness to lies, evil, fear, and confusion. All right, I've said a lot. Most people won't listen to this because it's not a 3-minute soundbite or a 30-second one, right? You want to talk about living in an Orwellian society? Well, there you go. People can't sit down and listen to something for longer than a few minutes. I'm surprised that doesn't apply to football and golf. Isn't it amazing how things work like that? You live in a world of diversions. Don't get me wrong, I love football. I'm not a big fan of golf. But I love football. All right, folks. Chew on it. Think through it. Listen to it in bits and pieces. I don't care. But do listen. Do test it. And consider these words. Because as it is for people, so too it is for this nation and all nations.